Welcome to NerdHouseGeeks.com. We are doing a deep dive into .NET Core, and this video is a continuation of examining the Startup.cs class. This is part 2. In part 1, we touch heavily on the configured method, and in this video, we will dive into the ConfigureServices method. So, how did we get here? So this is a series, and initially we started with the project file and examining that. Then we went into the program.cs, and our last video in the series prior to this one has been about the startup class. But the startup class has a lot of things going on, as you will see, because this is where all of the initialization of the program begins. And between these videos, I break up part 1 being about the configure method and part 2 being about the ConfigureServices method. So, what is the difference between ConfigureServices and the configure method? Short answer, the ConfigureServices is used to configure dependency injection, and the configure method is used to set up middleware and different routing rules. Our primary focus is going to be on the ConfigureServices method, but they kind of work in tandem. So the ConfigureServices method, here are 3 important points you have to know about it. First of all, this method is optional. And again, this is called by the host before the configure method to configure the app services. And this is where configuration options are set by convention. So what does this all mean? This is mean where we get environment variables. We retrieve the value of environment variables. And in Visual Studio, I'm going to jump into the launch setting.js, and this is where environment variables are stored in ASP.NET Core. For example, like the ASP.NET Core _ environment, and to indicate the runtime environment. You may also change the environment variables directly in the launch setting.json. So I don't know how many people know about that, but we're going to give you a quick demo of what this is. Okay, so right now we're in Visual Studio. This is the cool app application. On the properties, you see launch settings, and this is the launch settings.json. And as you can see, this is where we could represent different environment variables in our project. Now, traditionally, this is set here. When I first learned about it, I think it was in the properties. And here's where you would add or remove different environment variables. You know, we tend to use these for all types of different reasons, but when you're running not on the server and locally in Visual Studio, this is just kind of a heads up of what this file does. I didn't always knew that. I thought it was magically stored somewhere, and then I was like, oh, is that what that's all about? So that's just a quick demo of it. If I was to change this, if I was reading from environment variables and I changed it to, I don't know, to prod, then, you know, we could, if our code reacts differently depending on the environment, we can start testing those issues here. I want to apologize in advance. This is slide heavy, but we have to get our hands and our understanding of what's going on in .NET that is making MVC programming possible. We'll be talking about app settings and what all goes on in this section of .NET Core and why it's important when it comes to dependency injection. So very slide intensive, but we'll get there. And I'm sure you may already be familiar with the settings files, but we'll just point that out. That's also important too. The setting files, reading value from the settings file from the app.settings.json or the app.development.json and ASP.core. So the reason for this file is for constants that need to be used throughout an application, but we just cannot simply hard code them because we know that they will change. If you hard code them, you will have to change them in every location. We keep such constants in a single location and access them there whenever we need them. Key rule here is do not put passwords into the settings file. There is a part of .NET Core called Managed Secrets. That's not getting covered in this portion, but that's to come. But just a heads up, this is really what the settings file is for. Um, I I I just wanted to go over that because that's really important to know because I've worked in companies where so much was dumped into the settings file and it doesn't fit there. It doesn't. But, thankfully all the smart guys figured this out. We just learn it and just continue moving. And so just a quick demo where the setting files is, and I'll get into that right now. And so very quickly, this is our app settings.json, one of our most visible files. So we just talked about things that occur with inside of the configure method, and those three things are the two previous ones, of course, is the environment variables, you have access to that, and then the settings file. But that last option, that is the one of the heavily used reasons, is dependency injection. Now, I'm just going to read you this real quickly. Dependency injection pattern is used heavily in ASP.core architecture. The ConfigureServices method is a place where you can register your dependent classes. After registering dependent classes, it can be used anywhere in the application by including it in the parameters of constructors. It's not the only way, but that's common. The IOC container will inject it automatically. So, big question I threw out there. So, what is the IOC container? It is a framework for implementing automatic dependency injection. We're in this section, and this is going to be extremely heavy for us because before I can demo it, there are a lot of little moving pieces because this is a brand new app and we're going to build it up to an MVC app. So let's just be patient. So one of the things IOC was mentioned, and IOC is the abbreviation for inversion of control. In software engineering, inversion of control is a programming principle. This is the first step towards achieving loose couple design. It is used to invert different kinds of controls in object-oriented design to achieve loose coupling. So, what does this mean? This means the IOC container creates an object of a specific class and also injects all the dependency objects throughout a constructor, a property, or a method at runtime, and disposes it all at the appropriate time. So to demo dependency injection, we need to configure and add some changes to our code. We're going to have to make changes to the middleware and make several code changes to get a good demonstration of dependency injection here. And that's because of where we started the application. We started it from scratch and then started adding all the components. So one of the first things we're going to get into is enabling MVC before we can demo this dependency injection. So what is MVC? Well, it's a design pattern. This pattern helps to achieve separation of concern. The MVC stands for the model, the view, and the controller architectural part, and it separates an application into three main groups of components: the models, the view, and the controller. The model's responsibility is to represent the state of the application and any business logic or operation that should be performed by it. The view responsibilities are for presenting content through the user interface. And the controller are the components that handle user interactions, work with the model, and ultimately select a view to render. All right, we're gonna put together a demonstration of this all. So what we're going to do here is start by demoing the creating of a controller. The first thing we're going to do is create a controllers directory. So we'll go here, add new folder, and by convention, this is where we'll be putting our code for the controllers. So in the MVC pattern, that's where the controllers will go. So in there, we'll create a class called app controller. And so we will add that class. And this is all by its convention of how MVC maps to which controller to execute which actions and which UIs to render and all the different things you can do there. So it's a controller, and we go here with the base class of we inherit from controller. No, the controller class. And I'll give you the little squiggly line because it needs to import. Come on, be nice. And so this is the namespace that you need to import Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC. Okay, so in this controller, let's create an action. Public. And we are creating a new method with iActionResult. So let me create it first. Action result. And it's going to be called index. And in short, iActionResults are classes which represent things that the client is supposed to do as a result of the controller's action. They may need to get a file or redirect or any of a myriad of things. The most common thing the client might want to do after calling a controller action is represented as an action result. So in our case, we want to return a view. So we will go ahead and here and return. Oops, that won't do. So what a view is, a view is what it's going to return. In MVC, there's a convention, and the convention for this is to use a folder called views to store the views you want to return. So sorry, we need to have that semicolon there. And so now we're going to add another directory. By convention, it should be called views. Oh, relax, Shane. It will look into this views folder for a folder name app, just app. And so it's going to ignore controller when it's looking. It's going to take this first part and say app, and controllers is implied by this convention. So it's when you attach this MVC, it's saying, hey, I'm going to be looking for a folder name app, and I'm going to return looking to a view folders when the index action is called. And so we need to have that views folder there. And there we go. Oh no. Hey, I get you. It's cool to see the screw ups too. And that's the folder it's going to look for by convention. Okay. So return view doesn't represent HTML, but what is called Razor. Razor is a syntax for generating and replacing and adding new logic in the code and markup itself. So it's looking for a view in here, and what are we expecting that view's name to be? Index. So here's our app folder. Now we're going to add a view here. And so we're going to click on this, and the name of our view will be index. Oh, by the way, I don't think it has to be capitalized, but I'm just making sure that this index matches. And there is the beginning of our app here. So you have the controller, looking for the app folder, looking for the index action here, which is returning a view because we asked it to. And in here, allow us to add something that we call the Razor code. And Razor syntax code blocks start with an @ and they look like this. Hey, just automatically. So technically right now we have our web page, and we have something called the view data. I'll explain that later. We have an index, and this should render a page that shows something that reflects what we're looking here. So magically, we're going to click on Start. I'm going to see what happens here. I'm going to run it. Hopefully it doesn't explode because of assembling this course. And let's see what I have here. I'm going to bring this into our view, and it just says Hello World. And it's like, where's all this nonsense? What's going on, Shane? Well, we're going to be touching on the subject we've already focused on. We're going to go back to our startup class, and this is where we're dealing with our middleware. Now, I went ahead and copy and paste this text, everything here so we can move quickly. So let me explain what we expected here. We already did this example. We have user routing. We've already explained that, but here's the app.run. And no matter what happened, this config method is intercepting all the calls by the runtime, right? And basically this is saying whatever you call, it's always going to respond with hello world. So now what we're going to do is begin to assemble and enable MVC. Okay. So to enable MVC, the first thing you have to do is enable the use endpoint. So what does that mean here? So we got app.endpoint. I could have typed this out, but and when you're not starting from scratch, this is automatically put into a template. But this here is the use endpoint. Now, what this is saying is it's going to, what we're doing here is populating the routing table. Okay. And this is the default routing. That name doesn't make it the default routing. That's just for us to identify it. And if we're looking at how we're configuring the routing, we're saying, hey, whatever they put in the URL, see if it matches the controller, which in this case would be app controller. So it's expecting app controller and an action. That action it's looking for is this index action. So it is trying to identify a controller that you're looking for, which is the app, the action index, which will, and optionally, that's with this question mark, if they have an ID in here. So it's just looking at this route mapping and trying to see, does this routing map to anything we have in our controller folder by convention. Okay. This here is saying if none of that is supplied, the default is control app index. And because the ID is optional, we didn't need to specify. But if we wanted to, we can put it here. So shortly after this, we're ready to run our app and see all the good stuff. All right, let's run that. Ding, 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 ding. And we get an error. Oh, so we've configured our middleware, and there's one more thing to configure. How do we indicate to the application that what we're doing is expecting MVC? And that's when we come to our ConfigureServices. The ASP.NET Core controller uses routing middleware to match URLs on incoming requests and map them to an action. So that's what this does. We use a method named the map controller, and the template looks like this. And so when we run it, we get an error. And the problem is that the map controller route needs us to add a service to the ConfigureServices. And we'll be adding our first service. And that service, so we go to services, and we're working on the MVC project. And here we go, dot, and we're getting ready to add controller with views. You just use add controller if you're creating APIs, but with views, and boom. So we added the endpoint middleware. We configure its routing and the mapping. And if none is supplied, it automatically takes you to this route. And then we configure a service that is going to tell this application, hey, we're expecting controllers with views. Now we run this thing. Dun, 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 dun. Sorry, it's going to open up on the other window. There's either going to be a big explosion or it's going to and called me embarrassed. Yes. Well, you see right here where I screwed up? Right here. See that right there? That's incorrect. Yeah. I wish I could say I did that on purpose, but little screw ups like this happen from time to time. I have an extra character in there. Yay! I'm not a complete moron after all. Or I kinda am. Alright, so we're gonna move that little extra character and let's embarrass the Shanester one more time. Here we go. This time more humbly. Oh, let's try this page over. And will it work? It worked! Oh my gosh. You know, after 20 attempts, it ought to work. Oh my goodness. So we're getting the start of something. We have we have something defined here as our view, and we're getting what we're expected from the view. And we looked at what's going on in the controller. It says, hey, we're expecting the app controller index to be the default view if we don't specify it. So it's going to come here by default. That's why they name it the default here. And it broke a few times, so we know that this template has to be correct. You can't put extra stuff in there that it does not recognize. We configured middleware. We added a service. And that is the very beginning of our MVC project. And so we'll just grow from here. So when we return, we will come back to this ugly page and create something more artfully, something beautiful, something called a web page. And we're going to do web stuff. I wanted to make a quick note that the reason that page showed up is because this is the local host it's running on, but because I didn't supply the rest of it, it goes to our default route. Let's see if I'm going to embarrass myself again. And it should show the exact same thing. Ta-da! So now you're understanding how that routing connects to which views are displayed. Go if this is not supplied, whatever it runs up the first time, by default, run that route. Okay, this is beautiful. Thank you very much. Hey yo! 2021 has begun. Thank you so very much for watching these videos. Like and subscribe if you want to. I appreciate every way you support. Have a lovely day, night, just depending on what time it is in your part of the world.